Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Good Grief. My name is Dr. Christine Malone, and in this podcast, we talk about trauma, tragedy, and survival. In each episode, I will interview someone that has gone through grief in some way, and we will discuss the impact it has had on their life. By sharing these stories, we hope that others won't feel alone should they be going through similar situations. Enjoy. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me for this podcast. My guest today is going to tell us about her situation, her story, and what she's gone through with her daughter. So, guest, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and giving us some background on your daughter.
Thank you. My name's Molly Lyman, and I live in the suburbs with my family. My partner, husband Matt, and I have been married for almost 14 years, and we have two daughters. Phoebe is 9, and Paige is 6.5. She will definitely correct you if you say 6. It's 6.5. And Phoebe has Down syndrome, which has really shaped and changed my life over the last 9 years. And so I'm always excited to share our story and talk about like what we've learned about life and parenting and all of it. Because we are just, our family feels like it's feels like we were meant to be all together, like all the pieces are in place.
Yeah, I love that about you and seeing you on Facebook. So, when did you find out that Phoebe had Down syndrome?
Well, I was pregnant, obviously. I had had 2 miscarriages the year prior. This was in like 2013. Back-to-back miscarriages. And so I'd already done a fair share of grieving. And when I was pregnant again, I said, I don't want genetic testing because this is my baby. I just want to have my baby at this point, and no matter what, I'm going to have my baby. And the pregnancy was very normal. We had our 20-week ultrasound. There weren't any hard markers, as we call them. So things were going along fine. And then around 37 weeks, we went in for my regular checkup, with the doctor, and she measured my belly, and it was measuring kind of big. And she said, well, you probably just have a really big baby. So she said, just check it out. Let's go get another ultrasound. So, and of course I was like 34, so I was quote unquote geriatric. So everybody's being, very, very attentive. So we went in for our 37 or for the ultrasound, and there was, the face of the tech kind of changed, and she had to leave the ultrasound tech, and she had to leave the room, and she brought back the radiologist. Yes. And he said that Phoebe had I had excess amniotic fluid because the baby had a double bubble. I don't know if it's a hard marker for Down syndrome.
Okay.
So, and he just delivered it in a very, very somber way. And so, of course, I just burst into tears and was like, what does this mean? What's happening? They really don't, the ultrasound people don't give you a lot of information. They just kind of tell you, here's what we see. And so then I got on the phone with my doctor. She said, well, yeah, we're going to need to get an amniocentesis. And I said, okay, but is my baby going to be okay? Is she dying? I knew she was a girl. And she said, no, your baby's going to be okay. We just need to find out what this means. So a couple days later, I got the FISH, which is the super rapid amniocentesis. They did that, and then they sent me for another ultrasound. They were doing a lot of stress tests, where they are constantly monitoring the baby's heartbeat. And as we were, kind of being all hooked up to everything, the results came in that Phoebe had trisomy 21. which is Down syndrome. And the doctor had to deliver it to me on the phone because I was at a different hospital getting the ultrasound. And she said, "I'm so, so sorry." And my heart just dropped. And I looked at my husband, Matt, and, he could see it in my face. And we were just broken. I mean, we just both wept. And it was devastating. It was in that specific moment, it was almost like hearing that we'd had another miscarriage. It felt like this horrible thing. And then we went into the ultrasound, and it was even more just heart-wrenching to look at the screen and see this baby and feel like I don't recognize this person in my body. I don't recognize, and to feel that sense of disconnect and that sense of loss just looking at the screen. And it was awful. It was so like we were just grief stricken.
So, did you have any? I mean, obviously, we've all heard the diagnosis. It's not uncommon. Any knowledge of other people that have Down syndrome or children that have Down syndrome or anything like that, where you could draw upon, that understanding for what it might be like for you with the daughter?
No, I mean, I had as much knowledge as most people do. Assume that, you see a little bit here and there, someone, a friend of a friend of a friend, or you've heard about someone with Down syndrome, or you occasionally see people on TV with Down syndrome, but I had very little knowledge about what it meant. So, which was scary. When you get the diagnosis, you don't get a lot of information right away.
That was going to be
Um,
my next question. So when you talked about how the providers kind of delivered this to you as if they're telling you, devastating news, which is kind of how you responded, partly maybe because of how they delivered it to you, did they give you any information or resources or, a parents group or anything where you could find out more about this and, start to, in those last 3 weeks, assuming you went to term, um, be more prepared at all?
well, they don't, not in that moment. The doctors don't. But what they do is then the hospital kind of flags you. Everything started happening very quickly because once we had all this, there was because I had excess amniotic fluid, I had to be induced a week early. So I was like at 39 weeks. And they had to drain some of that amniotic fluid. It was all very messy, and it was a long birth, but a long labor. But once I was sort of checked in to the hospital, they did connect me with, I believe it was someone from ARC of King County.
Oh,
And they did give me a folder with resources, and it was just paper resources, like, um, and some of it was great. There was a little booklet with information about kids with Down syndrome. It's all, pretty generalized, but at least it's something. And they do kind of start you in the process of connecting with other people, giving you names and groups and organizations to kind of steer you in the right direction.
yeah, that had to be helpful. So your family, your parents, your grandparents, whatever in the family, how did they respond? And did you feel like they were being supportive, or were they, how did they react when they heard this news?
Well, I think, um, of course, everyone was really supportive, and they really offered a lot of love and kind words to me and Matt. I think the message that I got from a lot of people was that this happened to the right people. Matt and I have a really strong relationship, and that if this were going to happen to any two people, that we were the right ones for the job. And so that was helpful. I think it, again, everybody, we were all kind of, we had no idea what it would be like. So no one, people would send me videos and stories and stuff like that. I started to get kind of inundated with just people sending me, well, I just heard this and I just heard this. I think everyone wants to reassure you in a way,
Yeah.
which is nice, but also kind of overwhelming, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So when baby
um,
was born, I know I already know the answer, but did she have some complications or things that needed to be, taken care of when she was first born?
yes. So like the hard marker that they found was called duodenal atresia. So her stomach wasn't properly connected to her intestines. So which is why she wasn't processing amniotic fluid. So the day after she was born, she had to have surgery, and they had to kind of rebuild her whole digestive system.
Mm.
And then she had to spend, I think it was 17 days in the NICU, like healing and learning how to eat. Because when she was born, she had to be fed through through a tube, and then not a stomach tube, not a GI tube, but like just what do they call it, a PIC line or
Yeah. Or a jejunal tube? Was it into actually her lower intestines, or was it just food through the
no,
IV? Okay, just through IV.
yeah. So that, but then she learned quickly how to take a bottle and all that. And, the nurses in the NICU were absolutely just so incredible. They were so good, with everything. And, so we spent the first few weeks of her life just doing that, just learning, how to be with her, trying to figure out how to feed her. We couldn't I couldn't even hold her I mean, they let me hold her for a few minutes when she was born. But then they whisked her off. And then when she had her surgery, we couldn't hold her for like 24 hours or
Mm.
something. And that was really hard. She was just kind of in this container in the NICU. And we had to just visit her constantly. And we would read books to her and sing to her and talk to her. And, um, but it was a lot. It was a lot.
A lot to process. So,
Yes,
so
yes.
take us to, kind of once you get home and, it's now the three of you, kind of when did you or when and how did you get to the spot where, you weren't devastated and you realized this isn't a devastating um, news for you? I mean, how did you get there? What happened? What steps did you take to kind of get you to that space?
Yes. Well, I mean, when she was born, a lot of moms talk about like whether or not you fall instantly in love with your baby. I don't even know that I was in that space. I was so overwhelmed. I did adore her. She had so much hair when she was born. She
I
had like a
remember that.
full head of hair. So, and in the 2 weeks in the NICU, I did feel an attachment to her. I wanted to make sure she was okay and she was growing and all that. But I was so caught up in the sort of the medical part of everything.
Yeah.
Um, and even when we brought her home, it was so much about like feeding and sleeping. And I mean, that's true with all babies, but then there was this added element of stress. And someone gave me a book. Um, and I think a lot of parents with who get the diagnosis, the trisomy 121 diagnosis, it's about babies with Down syndrome. And maybe it's helpful for some, but for me, it was just a lot of the what ifs, sort of all the bad things that could happen. I was reading that. And finally, I was like, I can't read this. I just need to like learn from her and experience this. I think it was like 8 weeks. She was like 8 weeks old. We were just at home and I was holding her, and she just looked me straight in the eyes, and she kind of gave me her first smile. And it was like this wisdom. I don't know. There was something about the look that she gave me. It just clicked in my brain. it was sort of like a we got this, or we're gonna do this together, and I'm with you. And from that moment on, it was like I don't see Down syndrome when I look at Phoebe. I see Phoebe. She's Phoebe. She has a whole personality. She has a whole range of emotions. She has her own ideas and her own personality, and it's all amazing. And that's what I see when I look at her. And that is like one of the biggest things I learned is, I don't see her diagnosis. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of ways it affects our lives, but I just, she's her own person. And that's just the most incredible part.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I know about you is that you and your husband you don't set limitations for her. You let her show you where she's going to go and what she can or can't do, which I think is um, probably incredibly, helps her to just be who she is and so on, rather than you need to do this, you need to do that. And we've come a long way in society with how we uh, respond to and treat, educate. What do you want to say that families with a child with Down syndrome. So but I also know that you have done a lot of work yourself, you and your husband on, some advocacy for, other families. Um, and what are you doing? What do you do? Um, how do you get involved in that? And how does that help you with, just reaching out to others and so on? So how would you describe that?
Well, I think early on, yes, I figured out early on that and I say this to people, I say I believe in Phoebe, and I believe she can do anything. And I kind of took that on as my mantra, and I connected with other people who felt other families who felt similarly, like we want the world to be a place where our child belongs. And so it's always a challenge. It's been a challenge, and it gets when they're babies, there's a certain level of greater acceptance, I guess. And then the older she gets, the harder it is with complex school and social situations. But Matt and I really are dedicated to advocating for inclusion for all students with all disabilities. And what that means is they're in a classroom, a general education classroom with their peers as much as possible. 100% would be the goal. And they learn alongside their peers, and their peers learn a lot from being with kids that are different. And it's hard because our education system was not really built to do that. And there are so many limitations. Don't get me started on how we don't pay our teachers enough, but it's hard. There's been a lot of challenges, but we've been so lucky to have educators that are willing to work with us and willing to listen and collaborate. And Phoebe has been included, and it's been amazing to see. She is doing great at school. I mean, she has her struggles, definitely. She's about to go into fourth grade, but she reads, and she loves science, and she loves doing class presentations to her class. So she's really learning and adapting so well being with her peers. And I see her peers growing too. They like you see them being more patient and more compassionate and having more tolerance for things that are a little bit different. And that's the one, that's a great thing too, because when they get into the world as adults, there's a lot of differences, and there's a lot of distractions, and the world is kind of messy, and you can't just keep kids, as much as we want to keep them safe, we can't keep them in a bubble. So kind of exposing them to differences early is really, I think it's helpful. And I see it in my other daughter, Paige. She's just like this incredible leader, kind of advocate already at 6.5 years old. So that's kind of, we're always striving towards how can we help her belong in this environment?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I know before we started recording, I was telling you about my daughter after having experienced, life with a disabled brother, really learned at a very young age that there people are different and it's okay, and to be comfortable with people who are different. And that I don't think she would have learned if she hadn't been exposed to that. So to have the kids in the classroom, really see that this is not, something to be afraid of, or she shouldn't be excluded, or whatever, terms you want to use, I think is a tremendous value to those kids that she goes to school with. So I'm so glad she can be in school, mainstream school. That's fantastic. Um, so you get from the point of being, where you're not sure what this diagnosis is and how you're going to deal with it and so on, and now you've come to where you are today. So if you were, talking to someone who was in your space and at 37 weeks pregnant and were given this diagnosis, what advice would you give? And I know, at this point in your journey, it may seem like, natural to you, but if you were to put yourself back in your shoes back at 37 weeks pregnant, what would you say to that family, for, whether it's resources or information, or um, at the very least to not expect only bad things?
Right. Well, first, I would say congratulations, and I'm so excited for you. I think, that was the thing, like you mentioned earlier, having the news delivered in a very somber way is not helpful. You're having a baby, and your baby is going to be a little different, and your life is going to be different. I mean, I think that's the part that you grieve, is that you have this expectation of this quote unquote perfect or even normal life. But those are, there's not really any such thing as perfect or normal.
Mhm.
And you're gonna have a baby, and it's exciting, and you be happy. And with every this is what I would say, is with every kid there's a lot of unknowns and there's a lot of uncertainties. And I think that's something that the medical community might stress a bit about, you know kids with who are born with Down syndrome, is that there could be this, there could be heart defects, or there could be this, or there could be that, which is all true. But it's not a guarantee. Phoebe Net was not born with a heart defect. And you could have a child that does not have a chromosomal disability or a chromosomal difference. And you never know what's going to happen. Paige, my other daughter, she kept getting RSV as a kid and was hospitalized. I mean, it's like you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that's just to say that you're just kind of in it for the adventure. And I would say that you do learn so much about life having a kid with a disability. You learn so much more about appreciating different people, and you learn so much about love and your own limits, and your own ability to um, advocate and be there for your children. So it's going to be a great experience. This is what I would say to a family. It will be a great experience. You will love it. You will love being a parent, and that's what matters. You're a parent first and foremost, and it's a good thing.
Yeah. For anyone who's listening that actually works in healthcare, I'm curious what you would say. You talk about getting that diagnosis a very somber way, as if they're giving you this sentence, if you will, rather than in news in any other format. What would you say? People could learn from your story, which I know is not unusual. In sharing that diagnosis, right? I mean, from the moment of the technician leaving the ultrasound to go get the radiologist, which I've heard from other people, their stories of that's just, already something's not okay. How could those things be done in a more positive way, I guess is the way I want to phrase that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, we have a lot to learn as a culture, just not being afraid of these differences
Yeah.
so that it's not scary.
Yeah, no, I agree. Along with, what you would talk to about, parents who were, in that situation, how about families, coworkers, someone who's, this is my friend, this is happening to, what can they do, to help these parents, um, or what can they say, or what should they not say, I guess is a better way, because
That's
I am
great.
sure there's plenty of that out there, that you would advise and say, hey, you know what, do this or don't do that.
Well, one thing that comes up a lot, and the thing is, I know that people are so well intentioned, and I don't, I pick and choose when I'm going to correct people, but one thing that comes up a lot is, oh, people again trying to reassure you will say, oh, well, people with Down syndrome are so happy all the time, or they're just so cute, or they're like little angels or little cherubs or little, it's like they're talking about a dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, you hear about, uh, yeah, sort of infantilizing them, or dehumanizing them. These are human beings. They're not, Phoebe is definitely not happy all the time. She has a temper. She cries. She gets very mad at me. She tells me she hates me sometimes. I mean, she's a 9-year old.
Yeah.
So she goes through the whole gamut. She's not happy or laughing or smiling all the time. That is definitely true. And I think she's cute, but I think both my kids are cute. And so it's just important that, like, while we celebrate the differences, we don't dehumanize. We still recognize that people with Down syndrome are capable of a lot, and to really kind of show that respect and that um, dignity, give some dignity to people, which I think is something that we're kind of in, as a culture, we're still sort of working on.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that on pretty much any differences or disabilities. What we're really, I know in my case with my son, I felt like people were approaching me from a space of like I'd like my son had died, right? So it's like a grieving space rather than congratulations, this baby, but
Right.
I'm so sorry you have this baby. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not. So, I'm really
Yeah.
thinking that, and I'm just thinking, what would be helpful is if you could just say congratulations and whatever you would do to any other parent with a newborn, right? Rather than, place your whatever thoughts and prejudices and biases or preconceived notions on those parents to just say, like any other parent and then follow their lead, right? How can I help you? Is there something I can do? Rather than give, and I know when you say people are well intentioned, I know when my son passed away, I had somebody at his funeral say to me, "It's a good thing you have other children," as if I'd lost a shoe. And I thought,
Right.
really, that's this. And I know she meant well. I know she did, but I thought at the time, what an incredibly stupid thing for you to say to me at this moment in time. And I think of myself, gosh, did you to that person? Did you ever think back on that and realize what an asinine thing that was to say?
Yeah.
But again, I didn't question it. I just kind of smiled and said, thank you, because I thought that, within a battle, I was one to have, at my son's funeral, especially. But yeah, so some of that well-intentioned things, I think people need to sort of think about, um, what would be a better
And
way to respond rather than pity and grief.
mhm.
And I'm so sorry this happened to you, and show me sympathy. Those things are just they're not helpful. And I don't think it doesn't help the parents either. So that's kind of what I'm hearing from you as well. So yeah, I think that's kind of if anybody's
And I
listening.
think it's okay. It's okay to ask questions. I have some, my close friends will ask, like, how do I say this? Or like, how, what, if they spend time with Phoebe, they're like, what would be best for her in this situation? And I love it when people just ask questions. Like, we shouldn't feel weird about talking about it. Like,
Right.
just ask, because you learn so much more when you are curious
Yeah. Yeah.
about the disability.
Yeah, and it's not offensive to you to have someone ask. It's like they are genuinely need to be told or held. How do I do this, right? Rather than
Mm-hmm.
they are feeling like I can't ask because that's going to be like me pointing out that I'm, whatever. I mean, I'll even come from a space of ignorance and say, I'm sorry, I don't know. So can you help me? What do I need to know about this, or how should I do this, or something? Because I'm the one that needs to learn. It's not. I'm not trying to put it on you. And I'm not feeling bad. I'm just like wanting to know how I could do something that would be helpful, or how do I interact with this child, or whatever it might be. What are they capable of? What are they not capable of? What should I not take them out to do? Whatever it might be, if you're not used to that. So I think that's a great piece of advice for sure. So before we end, is there any other things you'd like to share with our listeners about, kind of your family? um, whatever. I mean, we've already talked about what advice you'd give and so on, but anything else you'd like to share before we end?
I just really appreciate always having a chance to tell the story and having a chance to advocate. I guess in many ways, um, I I am that parent with schools and in the community of always being, speaking up for people with disabilities. But it's really important, and I'm just grateful to be in a position where I can advocate. And I just hope too that other people will hear this and feel um, a sense, if the other families who are going through something similar feel a sense of empowerment and hopefully a hope for the future. And so, thank you for giving me this chance to kind of talk about something that I am very passionate about.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so thankful that you were willing to become a guest on my show. So thank you so much for your time. And we will be posting some links with your podcast to various organizations that you might share with our listeners, for anyone who's looking for more information or resources or so on that have to do with children with Down syndrome. 'Cause I think that would be very helpful as well. Some people maybe who don't know that they're out there and so on. So I appreciate that, and we will post that. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Good Grief. To hear more about my personal story, please pick up a copy of my book, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival, available in paperback, Kindle, and Audible via Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, and other online book retailers.